Hello? Hi everybody. And thank you all for being here today. And we're running a little bit later than expected because we got a lot more journalists than we expected, which is terrific because hopefully that means we'll get a bit more coverage. Because as you know, trying to get coverage these days with so much that's going on is very difficult. So first of all, before we get started, we have to consider health and safety. So I'm going to ask Colin White just to briefly run through the health and safety regulations. Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. The Mansion House very kindly prepared these notes for me. On hearing a fire alarm or discovering a fire, please leave the building by the nearest fire exit. So the way we came in there is probably the handiest one, but obviously we can go out to the left-hand side and out through the front door if circumstances require. But where we're heading for is St. Anne's Church on Dawson Street. So in the event of a fire, we go out and we head for the church. Don't stop to collect personal possessions. Toilets are out that door to the left, and I believe to the right also. We're no smoking here in the Mansion House. If you do need to smoke, it's out that side, and keep over that side. No smoking to be done in front of the Mansion House itself. And other than that, that's me done.
Okay, thanks, Colin. So next I'm going to call on our chairperson, Colin Mackenzie, and he's going to say a few words.
Good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome. I'm Colin Mackenzie. I'm the National Chairman of the Irish Kidney Association, and on behalf of myself and our national officers and the board and the members and our staff, we'd like to welcome you here this afternoon. And I think it is afternoon, it is. I'd written good morning here at one point. So you're very welcome to the launch. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. We couldn't be here for a couple of years. But I would like to thank the Lord Mayor for her permission to be here, because it is a lovely room. We have always enjoyed being here, and unfortunately, as you know, due to circumstances, that hasn't been possible. But it's great to be here, and we're glad to be back. I'd like to welcome the Cathaoirleach of the Seanad, Senator Mark Daly, and also Dr. Stephen Quinn from the Department of Health. And of course, we welcome all who are involved and support organ donation in whatever mode you're in that area. We especially welcome the donor families, because without you, without the gift of life, we could not be here in the first place. So we always remember, and remember it is Organ Donor Week, not Organ Recipient Week. We think of the donations, we think of the donors. And everybody who is a patient, everybody who's a transplanted patient has a story. And you might say, oh, transplants is all about transplant. But each person has their own story, and every story is different, and every story is worth hearing. And you will be that will be coming along now in a moment. But again, I would like to pay tribute to all the medical people in whatever role you served, because thank you for saving and protecting and keeping safe to the very best of your ability all our dialysis and transplant patients, especially the ones who are in hospital. You hear a lot nowadays about the compassion of the Irish people, because they've been very good to, you know why, and you hear a lot about it. But those of us in the transplant community have known that for years because of the kindness and generosity of our donor families. And we have, unfortunately and sadly, over the past couple of years, because we haven't been here, we have lost a few people who are no longer with us. And with that in mind, I'd ask you just to briefly observe a short silence in memory of those who passed on. Thank you very much. Now I will pass over back to Carol again, and you'll take it from here, Carol. Right?
Thanks, Colin. Next, we're going to have a video from the Minister for Health.
Good morning. I'm delighted to speak with you today to launch Organ Donor Awareness Week 2022. It's really important that we take this opportunity every year to raise awareness of the life-saving role of organ donation, also to raise awareness of the improvements in the quality of life it brings to recipients and to their families. Last year was a really challenging year for the medical community, but thanks to their tireless efforts and those of all the organ donation and transplantation support groups, a total of 206 transplants were carried out. 139 kidney transplants were performed at the National Renal Transplant Service in Beaumont Hospital. This includes 102 deceased donor kidney transplants and 35 living kidney donor transplants. 35 liver transplants and 2 pancreas transplants were performed at the National Liver Transplant Service in St. Vincent's Hospital. And 20 lung transplants and 10 heart transplants were performed at the National Heart and Lung Transplant Service at the Mater Hospital. All of this really is an extraordinary achievement, particularly in the face of such exceptionally challenging circumstances. It would not have been possible without the commitment and skill of the intensive care staff, procurement staff, surgical teams, medical and nursing staff. Through their resolve and dedication, the transplant service was maintained throughout the pandemic. I've been really encouraged to hear that the number of transplants performed in the first 3 months of this year exceeded the number performed in the same period in 2019. Hopefully, this is a sign of recovery from the hardships of the pandemic and a great accomplishment by those in the service. I want to acknowledge the tireless efforts of the staff in Organ Donation and Transplant Ireland and the teams in our 3 transplant centres. Their continued dedication and professionalism are essential to providing this vital service. Organ donation nurse managers perform the essential work of promoting the benefits that organ donation brings to recipients and building enthusiasm among hospital teams for organ donation. I'd like to thank them all for their determination in performing this really critical role. I'd also like to commend the efforts of staff working in the intensive care units right across the country. I'd like to commend them for their incredible work, their compassion when meeting with families and initiating the donation process. Of course, none of this work would be possible without the generosity of donors, without the generosity of their families, who selflessly agree to make this life-saving gift to other people. The support of the families for the donation process is truly an act of generosity, an act of altruism made during a tragic time, a time of great sadness and difficulty for them. It's my hope that they can take some solace in the relief, in the joy that is brought to the recipients and to their families. To all of you, I'd like to extend my sincere thanks. I understand that Chloe and Nicole will be sharing their story of organ donation with you today. Thank you for your generosity in sharing the gift of life with others at a time of immense sadness for you and for your family. As Minister for Health, I'm committed to further developing our organ donation and transplantation system and building on the progress that has been achieved so far. It's my objective to ensure that Ireland ranks amongst the most successful countries in the world in terms of the percentage of the population who donate their organs, the number of recipients who benefit from these donations, and the improvements in the quality of life for organ recipients. My department continues to work closely with the transplant hospitals, the intensive care staff, and the Organ Donation and Transplant Ireland to build upon the achievements of recent years. Incremental improvements to our organ procurement service will continue to be achieved through improved infrastructure in ICUs, developing our ability to receive donations from abroad, implementing a more robust organ retrieval service, and through transplant centres, maximising the conversion rates from donor opportunities that are presented. I welcome the recent publication of the Potential Donor Audit Feasibility Study report by the National Office of Clinical Audit. It's a positive step towards the establishment of a potential donor audit to ensure that no opportunities for donor conversion are missed and that more organs are available for patients in need. Additional funding of over €1 million has been allocated to transplant services this year to further develop the infrastructure and the equipment needed to meet expected demands, following the introduction of an opt-out system of organ donation as part of the Human Tissue Bill. Increasing the number of organ donations is essential, and the enactment of the bill has been a priority for me and for government. The legislation will be accompanied by a publicity campaign aiming to raise awareness of organ donation. Organ donor awareness campaigns such as this will help promote the act of organ donation as a social and a cultural norm for all of us in Ireland. Organ donation is one of the most selfless gifts we can give to somebody else. I would ask that during Organ Donation Awareness Week, everyone would not only consider becoming an organ donor themselves, but importantly share this intention with their loved ones. Having this conversation with your loved ones can inform their decision making and increase the possibility that on your death, your organs may be used to give someone else the opportunity of life. This will give your loved ones the comfort of knowing your wishes were carried through. In conclusion, I would like to say that I'm going to continue to work on developing our organ donation and transplantation system. I'm going to work on that to maximise transplantation rates for the benefit of patients and their families. The importance of Organ Donor Awareness Week cannot be overstated. I want to thank everyone involved for their efforts in making this week possible, and I wish it and you every success. Thank you.
Great. Our thanks to the Minister for such a vote of support and providing the extra funding, and it's great to see that there is that interest there in improving the transplant figures, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail in a minute. Next, I'd like to call on Mathew. Mathew is a student, and he has a very interesting story, and I'm going to hand over to Mathew now.
Thank you, Carol. First of all, thank you to the Mansion House and the Lord Mayor for having us. So my name is Mathew McNeive. I'm 23 years old and I'm from Knock in County Mayo, currently living up here in Clontarf for college. And my story pretty much began from birth. I was born with a condition called triad syndrome, very rare condition, which ultimately led to my right kidney being removed after 14 months old. And my whole childhood I've been in and out of Crumlin Hospital, several surgeries, in and out, coming up from Mayo. My mother loved the journey up and down, so she did. And in 2009, I started my peritoneal dialysis. Anyone who knows peritoneal dialysis, it's a tube in your stomach into your peritoneal cavity, and it's very dexterous work. My mother thankfully learned to do it at home. It consisted of 12 hours per session, so 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 4 days on, 2 days off. And that lasted 9 months, and then thankfully I got that favoured phone call in early 2010 for come to Temple Street, there's a kidney waiting for you. So mother, now another trip up to Dublin. She'd love to hear that, and thankfully the staff in Temple Street absolutely brilliant. The transplant went very smoothly, and it was funny, I'm a twin, and I was always 4 inches smaller than him. As soon as I got the kidney, it started to grow, my energy levels bounced up. I was at school, I was more attentive. The quality of life drastically increased. And not having that tube in your stomach, I finally got my childhood back in a way. I'd be on the machine in my home, and I could hear my brothers outside playing football, or there'd be barbecues going on in the summer that I wouldn't be able to take part in. I'd just be on the machine, reading a book or doing homework. And in 2015, my kidney started to reject, unfortunately. So I went on a 4-month course of therapy to halt the rejection of IVIG or rituximab. Anyone who's in the medical profession knows how much that takes a toll on your system. And that was very tough. In my leaving cert year, I missed the whole first semester from September to December. And then eventually, then in 2018, the kidney finally rejected. And this was my first year of college. The Monday I was due to start my college course was the Monday they actually put the catheter into my chest to start dialysis. And then anyone who knows dialysis, I was in Beaumont Hospital 3 times a week to 4 times a week, depending on how bad my bloods were. And going from Kevin Street down the road, that's where my college course is, to Temple Street or to Beaumont Hospital 3 to 4 times a week. Obviously, missed a lot of college, but thankfully, my mate James, who's here with me today, as soon as I get to dialysis, the notes were sent on. So I was looked after on that front. They were very good lads to have in the course with me. And that's the thing it's funny now, my college course is called Clinical Measurement Science. I'm actually working with a few of the people here in Beaumont, doing ECGs, echoes, EEGs and the likes. So it's kind of come full circle. Spent a lot of time in hospital, but funny enough, I actually love the hospital environment. Loved it so much I wanted to work there. It's very handy now. I finished my job and go up to dialysis then for the detox, as I do call it. So I started working in a hospital environment, the staff, the admiration I have for them. Growing up, you don't realise how good the health system in Ireland is until you're on the system. Anything you need, anything you want, you're so well looked after, well catered to. But the dialysis now, the diet especially, is very restrictive for a college student, as you can imagine. The fluid allowance wasn't always obeyed. But dialysis now, since having the kidney, you don't realise the difference of quality of life that kidney made to my life. Dialysis now 3 times a week, sometimes 4. All my family and my friends have gone skiing the last 12 months if they've gone abroad. Can't take part in that. Unless there's a dialysis centre near where you want to go abroad. Not always the case, especially during COVID, no one was taking anyone. Unfortunately now, when I first started dialysis, I thought, oh, brilliant. Have a kidney in no time. I have a twin brother, a mother, and my older brother. None of them are matches. So I was like, what's the point of having a twin if he's not a match for a kidney, So unfortunately then the whole COVID pandemic started and there was a massive kind of halt in transplants happening. So as the key word is it's a waiting list. Yeah, that's what you are. It's a waiting game. This would be my second kidney, so I have a very high level of antibodies. So I'm not that hard. I'm very hard to transplant. But thankfully, there is other options. There are other avenues to explore. Not sure if anyone's ever heard of the parent exchange, the kidney exchange scheme over in Coventry. So unfortunately, around the cases for many people, my mother's not a match for me, and say, Carol could not be a match for her daughter. My mum will give one to me, and Carol will give one to. There's like a swap that goes on over in Coventry. I think they're bringing it to Belfast soon. So that's what I'm relying on for transplant. The deceased donor list, obviously, where I got my first kidney. But that's the thing, it's organ donor awareness. The key word is awareness. Not everyone is carrying them, especially with COVID. It's a conversation that people need to have at home. It needs to become a mainstream conversation. And then another thing is, when I first got the kidney, it made leaps and bounds to my life. People say it becomes a cliche at this point, the gift of life. The gift of life, it is what it is, definitely what it is. I can't emphasize enough how much these organs, transplants mean to people. As a 23-year-old, you kind of want your kind of life back. I'm not having the same experiences as my brothers. They're going abroad. And that's really it. I think that's so hopefully now, with this, thankfully to everyone here, the journalists and the coverage is getting, and what Dr. Stephen Donnelly said there with the opt-in, the opt-out program, I'm really confident now in the next 12 months, there should be a kidney for me.
Thanks, Matthew. Very hard to follow that. You've spoken so well and you've shown how transplant keeps people alive. The first transplant gave you a great quality of life, and you can see how much Matthew was giving back to the system. And he's mentioned the paired exchange programme, which again was something that was set up by the HSE and the ODTI, and it enables people they go into a round where they try and match with people in England, because we just don't have a big enough population here. So thank you very much, Matthew, for that. Next, we're going to have Gillian is going to tell her story.
unfortunately, I'm the one that has to follow Matthew, so thank you. My name is Gillian. I'm 42 years of age, and I'm from Athy in County Kildare, now living in Portlaoise. I received my heart transplant in 2019 in the Mater. Back in 2004, I was in hospital for a routine procedure when it was discovered that I had an enlarged heart. So further investigations were undergoing when suddenly and tragically my brother Martin passed away from sudden adult death syndrome. He was away at college and he was only 18. This devastated our family. But I was allowed out for a few days to attend his funeral. When I returned, I was diagnosed with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy and I was implanted with an ICD. I continued to lead a normal life. I went back to hospital only for appointments, monitoring, and I think it's only looking back now, I suppose my health was always deteriorating from then on. But I continued as normal. Myself and my husband planned to start a family, but this didn't happen. We had 5 miscarriages and a few failed attempts at IVF when my consultant discussed with me that at this point I had very low cardiac output and I had gone into acute heart failure. I suppose at this point he decided that I should meet the transplant team in the Mater. But this isn't immediate, so myself and my husband, we continued as normal. And we decided in 2018 we would take a year out to travel. So we did. We went to Thailand and we went to Germany and we even lived in Spain for a few months. But we decided to come home for Christmas. So, with the intention of going back to travel. And it's at this stage I received a call from the heart transplant unit in the Mater. They had a cancellation appointment. So I decided to go, obviously. And I went with the intention of going to meet the team, doing a bit of shopping on the way home, and just having a nice day out. But this wasn't to happen, as when I went into the hospital, I met the team and they did a few routine tests and they decided I shouldn't leave the hospital. So this is when my 5-month stay in hospital happened. While I was in hospital, I was very independent at the start, but this gradually got worse. So I went from being independent to just having to stay in bed to eventually waking up one day attached to a VAD, which is a huge machine. It consists of 4 tubes which are connected through my lower chest, and this pumps blood into my heart chambers and around your body to keep you alive. This is what kept me alive for the few months I was in hospital, with also with the help of the trained staff. Even the most menial tasks were, I needed 2 to 3 people to help me, even to have a drink of water. While in hospital, I did have 2 false calls. One call led to me being prepped and down in the operating theatre, waiting outside to just be told that I wasn't a match. But you have to look at the positives, and at least those 2 false calls meant somebody else received a transplant. It is 3rd time lucky, so I received my heart transplant on the 3rd time. It's very hard to explain how to feel after your transplant. You're so happy and relieved for myself and my family, but also the pain and hurt, I suppose, for the donor and their family. I found it difficult to put into words, I suppose, what to say, but I did write my transplant letter my letter to the donor, the anonymous letter. So I hope this helped. My recovery was slow because I had to learn how to walk again and build myself back up. But only for the staff in the matter. They were absolutely amazing. Such kindness and dedication to me was, I just can't be repaid. To my husband, who is amazing, won't like me saying that, but even when we had to plan trips or anything before I received my transplant, he did all the work of finding places to go with no hills and quite close, and and thank you. And my mum, my dad, my sister, my brother-in-law, my 2 nephews, one of who is here, Finn, just thank you for everything. And to my in-laws, my family, friends. I do feel great now. I enjoy tennis, walking, spending time with family. Life has completely changed. COVID has set me back a little. I have not yet to return to work, where I work as a special needs assistant in Clonmead and Athy, which I hope to return to soon. I owe it to my donor's family to live the best life that I can, and to my brother who didn't have the chance that I did. Life is so precious, and I suppose until my experience with organ donor, I never really fully understood the importance. It is a gift of life, and I just want everybody to discuss and share your wishes with your family. It's huge. It's just words can't describe. So I hope my story can start the discussion with you and your family, and it did with my own family. Thank you.
As our chair said earlier, every story is different, every story is unique, and I think Gillian's story really shows how as a community we have to work together to help each other. And it's just such a positive story, that from not being able to walk, not being able to do anything, and now you're back playing tennis, and that's just brilliant to have. So well done. Thanks, Gillian. So next, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the process of organ donation and also the campaign itself. So if we look at the organ donation and transplant figures, the Minister has gone through them, but we can see, yes, there has been a very definite improvement in 2021 in terms of the number of transplant operations that have been done. But we still have a way to go, because we look at the 5-year average prior to COVID, there was a lot more operations carried out in the period prior to COVID than there is now. So although there's been an improvement, we still have a way to go to get back to our pre-COVID period. So if we look at the transplant process itself, there's a number of quite complicated steps that have to happen for every successful transplant. First of all, unfortunately, someone has to die in hospital. And then there are very strict guidelines about who can be considered to be a donor. And one of the things we wonder about in the IKA, and I know our charity partners wonder about as well, is everybody that is suitable to be a donor, are they actually identified? Because the ICU systems and the hospital care systems are under such pressure that are we actually identifying everybody who perhaps has the potential to be a donor? And then that family actually has to be approached. Highly trained staff who've been trained in a very sensitive, thorough fashion, and again, there's guidelines around that, have to approach the family to see is this something that they will consider. And then if the family are prepared to consider it, then there has to be medical suitability checked. And because we don't have electronic health records here in Ireland, that can take time and effort to actually see if that person is medically suitable. So if, for example, there are certain types of infections, it's not possible for that donation to proceed. So when it's seen that the person is medically suitable, then the family are approached again, further discussions take place, and then they give the final sign-off to say, yes, we are willing to donate. And then a retrieval team has to go to that hospital. And again, these are people who are highly trained, and they have to find the right equipment. They may bring some of them with them, but others, it may actually be that they have to find space in an operating theatre to actually remove the organs. And that's always a problem, because we know operating theatres are very heavily utilised, so that can take some time. And then once the organs are removed, it may be on surgical inspection that perhaps those organs are not suitable for transplantation. So this is why you've heard some people get multiple calls before they're actually transplanted. And then finally, the organs have to be transported in ambulance to the actual transplantation centre. And again, the surgeons there have to discuss the equipment that they need. They have to be happy that the organ is suitable for transplant, because it's a big operation, so you want to make sure you get a positive result out of it. And again, they are competing for theatre space. Now, for most kidney operations, an ICU bed isn't needed afterwards, but for most other lung, heart operations, an ICU bed is needed. And that's why we had the incident last year where an operation couldn't proceed because of lack of facilities. So it's quite a complex process. And I think it's a great tribute to the healthcare professionals and the donor families working in the system, that despite all the pressures of COVID and pressure that they were under, that they managed to keep transplant goings. And I think, we really owe them a great vote of thanks. So if the technology works, hopefully we get to the next slide. Oops, gone a bit too. So if we look at the current system of organ donation, what happens at the moment is, once a potential donor is identified, the family are approached for consent. So that happens in all instances. And when the new system comes in, which the Minister has referred to, people will opt out. So if somebody is opted out, the healthcare professionals will check the register, and if they see that Carol is opted out, Carol's family will not be approached, and obviously organ donation will not take place. But if Carol hasn't opted out, then the family will be approached. So this is a major shift in how family consent will be sought. So again, the technology is playing up a little bit. Oops, it's obviously slower. So, the reminders of the wish to be a donor. You don't have to have these reminders to actually be considered for a donor. In the current system, everybody is approached. What the donor card do is, they're a symbol of somebody's wish to be a donor. And they're quite a powerful symbol. I saw in the paper last year, they were doing a profile on the Liverpool football manager, and they said, he's a good guy, he carries a donor card. So good people carry donor cards. And then we also have the card can be downloaded digitally. Obviously, the next of kin can't sign this because it's a fairly basic program, but it's available. You can put in your next of kin. And then on the driving licence, you put in code 115 if you want to be recorded as a donor card, as somebody who wants to donate their organs. And over 1 million people have signed the driving licence to say they want to be donors, which is fantastic when you consider there's been no major public awareness campaign around that. So Irish people do have a very positive affinity towards donating their organs. And the big problem in the organ donation process is we do not have a lot of information. And the Minister referred to the potential donor audit. And this is a report produced by the National Office of Clinical Audit, where they looked at the process of organ donation, all those different steps that have to happen. And they looked at what other countries are doing. And what other countries are doing is they're capturing this information, and they're using this information to actually drive improvement. So they can see, well, are all potential donors being approached? How many families are being approached? What's the medical suitability? What were the reasons why this organ was not seen as being medically suitable? And I think it's very true to say that if you don't have that information, you can't improve it. So we very much welcome the idea that we would have as routine potential donor audit, and that this would be produced on a routine basis and on a regular basis, and would be available publicly right down to individual hospital level. So the campaign itself, as Colin mentioned, we weren't able to run this for a couple of years because of COVID. COVID hasn't finished, and I can see many of you are wearing masks because for the immune compromised, people are still at risk. But we've got to keep raising awareness of organ donation. So most of our work is going to be online, and the hashtag is Share Your Wishes, Donor Week 22. And the first feature is in RTE Nationwide are devoted a full programme. You can see this is a photograph of children at school, and one of them, Saoirse, her family donated her oldest sister's organ, and it's a beautiful story, well worth watching, and they tell it very, very well. And then we have product placement in Fair City, where the poster will appear during this week in Fair City, so you can watch out for it, and if you see it online, take a photograph and share it with us on our social media. And then we have the various different versions of the poster available in Polish, English and Irish, and you've seen versions of the posters in this venue. And then we'd like to thank the Irish Pharmacy Union have come on board and promoted the campaign, and we have a number of pharmacists who are either displaying organ donor cards so people can take them, or they're sharing them on their social media, or they're showing physical posters, but they also have digital posters as well, the ones that are using digital display boards, so watch out for them as well. And then Clear Channel are providing, again, like the chemists, free advertising. So that will be in around 30 locations around the country. So watch out for them. And that's from April the 19th to April the 30th. And then we have public sites around the country lit up. And what we'd like people to do is to take their photographs outside these buildings if they're living nearby with a donor card and put it on social media using the hashtag Share Your Wishes. And why green? Well, green is internationally recognised as the colour of organ donation, and it symbolises hope and rebirth. And people awaiting on transplants, they live in hope. They live in the hope of a new life. But they're also, and as we heard so eloquently from Gillian, they also hope that they know somebody has to die for them to get this gift of new life. So it can be a very difficult and very challenging time. And what we're hoping to do by lighting up the sites in green is to draw attention to organ donation being an integral part of Irish citizenship. And what we'd really like to get to is, many years ago, Trinity College did a study, and they asked all these kids in primary school, what does it mean to be Irish? And one of the key things, the majority of the kids came through it was, it means drink. The old stereotypes. We'd like to eventually get to a position where we replace drink with being Irish means being an organ donor. That's where we want to get to. So we have a dedicated website, a page dedicated to it where you can download all the resources, from the posters to Zoom backgrounds to banners for Twitter, banners for Facebook. There's a schools kit there. And what we'd really like people is to log on. This event is being recorded, so it'll be available on the website. The Minister's speech will be available on the website. So we'd love people to log on and engage with us on this website page and also on social media. So that's a quick overview. Thank you very much. And next, we're going to have another person tell their story. Christopher, if I could call on you now to come forward.
Not every day that I have to read from something that I have to speak. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for coming to such a beautiful event. My name is Christopher Nielsen, and 3-4 years ago, I was in a very, very dark place. I was slowly dying from my liver, which failed desperately. And no matter all the treatment they tried to give to me, didn't work. And I was put on the list for a transplant. My quality of life was extremely poor. As I grew increasingly weak, my cognition was severely affected as I failed to recognize my friends, my family, and needed frequent hospital admissions. My family was and is part of my life. And to leave them behind is not a nice thing. The thought is not nice either. I could not eat any food. I couldn't drink anything. I was in a constant nauseousness. My legs were horribly and painfully swollen. I couldn't walk. And despite extreme tiredness, I lay awake at night, confused, with severe cramps. Life wasn't wonderful. Finally, after a few years attending St. Vincent's Hospital, having been treated for liver cancer and struggled to try to have hope, I finally received a call one morning. The day was very, very long because we waited for the second call. And during that period, I prayed. Because in my mind, as a Christian, I thought about the operation. I thought about the person who have to lose his life for me. It was hard. I tried to hide it, but it was even harder for my family. Sorry, I kept it. I've been a doctor for many, many years. I dealt with severe cases of trauma. I've seen people die. I see their families. I see the hurt. In one room, you could save a life. And the room next door, you couldn't save a life because there was no donor. And that's hard. Very, very hard. And it's sad. And that sadness overcome me while we were driving to the hospital. Because in my mind, I was thinking about my donor. I hope that he wasn't in pain. I think about his family. Now, I say his. I don't know if my donor was a he or a she. But I was thinking about them as well. The heartache, the big decisions that they have to go through. I was quiet, maybe not that quiet. Amanda was driving the car. And when we arrived at the hospital, I was taken up to the room where they prepared me. Amanda was told to go home because she couldn't stay any longer. There was no need for her to stay at the hospital or because it's a long, long operation. And it was nighttime as well. And while I was waiting, I was thinking about my donor. Thinking about the family. My donor must have been, like other donors, all other donors, one hell of a good person. To grant me a second chance in life. I wouldn't have been here if it wasn't for my donor. The operation went well, and I could only thank God for being awake. It's like a second new life. I was reborn. People ask me, how did you feel after the operation? Now, my honest words is, I felt better than the day I was born. And to the donor families, thank you for taking that gracious decision. It's hard. It's very, very hard for them. But we do need donors. We need people to open their hearts and just think what you can do for another person. The greatest gift you can give to somebody. The greatest gift. There is no gift bigger than that of donating a part of you for somebody else to live a new life. And then we, who have received a donation, we have to be very, very careful in what we have received and look after that part the best as we can. I pray for my donor every day. I pray for his family every day. I could never forget it. And I'm here today to tell you the story. I went through many things in my life, but this is the greatest thing that I've ever been part of. I believe that the people in Ireland, everybody knows somebody that have a heart, kidney, liver, lungs, pancreas, problems. And I think with the generosity of the Irish people, it will be great to see organizations like this asking, put it up front, that we need more donors. And I pray for that. And I hope that the people of Ireland will open their hearts. Because that is what we need. to save people's lives. And if we can do that, the world will be a much better place. Thank you very much.
Again, another very unique story, very eloquently and very well told. And it shows how, and it's something that has really inspired me since I've come to the Irish Kidney Association, that when I'm talking to patients, people who've received transplants, they want to give back. They want to live life to the full. There is this sense of somebody else has died, so in order to do them justice, they have to live the best life they can. And it was something that I found irritating during COVID, that, this talk about, patients should just lock themselves away and let the rest of society get on with their lives. And yet you look at the 3 people we've had so far speaking today, and we did not choose them because of what they did, but we've had somebody who is a doctor, we've somebody who's a medical student in a hospital, we've a special needs assistant, and I think it's really important that society sees people not in black and white boxes, but as people. And I think that's the great thing about the gift of life, the transplantation. It really brings out the best. We're seeing people as people. And I think that's really important. So next we're going to have Mary. Mary's going to come up and tell her story now. Thanks, Mary.
Hello, everybody. My name is Mary McGarry. I'm a lung transplant. I will read from my notes if you don't mind. In 2002, I was diagnosed with pulmonary fibrosis. It's a progressive lung condition, and there was still no cure for it. Over the years, I went on aggressive treatment and multiple drugs I took, aimed at slowing the progression. From 2015, I started treatment, which saw me taking a lot of tablets every day. The side effects were severe. Patients often find the treatment unbearable. So in 2017, I contacted pneumonia, and things changed. The infection ran rampant through my body. And I was placed on oxygen in 2017. I underwent an evaluation test in the Mater to see was I suitable for a lung transplant. And it was bittersweet to be accepted. Leaving the hospital with a noisy portable oxygen attached to me wasn't easy. But anyway, I got through it. And I needed a lot of help when I got home. Even small things I couldn't do, like dressing and climbing the stairs. And my biggest fear was that the oxygen would run out. Or if we went somewhere and get stuck in traffic and not being home in time for my oxygen would run out of me. So then I was put on the transplant list and in the Mater, and after the 7th attempt, I got my lung transplant. And I was so used to going to the Mater and coming home that my dinner was ready, and I said, leave it in the oven, I'll be back to eat it. I didn't even take a bag with me when I was going that evening. And luckily enough, I was suitable for that transplant, and it was wonderful, and life has been great since. When I woke up in ICU, I was kind of surprised that I had survived the operation, and I couldn't believe it, And it took a little while, but after a while, I was fine enough to get home and get back to living again slowly, and taking life easy, because I had been working all my life. And my daughter got married, and we had a small little wedding. And then we got the pandemic, which didn't help. which meant that I was scared and afraid to go anywhere. And we had 3 grandchildren in the meantime, which was wonderful as well. And what else have we done? We've gone away maybe for a night or 2 to a hotel, myself and my husband. And then we got afraid to go anywhere for the past 2 years. So I'm forever grateful to the donor family that helped us. And I cannot say enough about the transplant unit in the matter. They've been wonderful. They look after us all so well there. What else did I want to say? I've written to the donor family through the transplant unit twice. My son and my son-in-law has been involved in raising money for the transplant unit. They've done loads of little things along the way, runs and all that. And there isn't much more I can tell you except that I feel good. I'm grateful every day I get up. I thank God I get up every day and put my feet on the floor. And, life is good. It is very good. And I am very, very grateful to the donors. And I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to give everybody a chance. And I think this is a wonderful week, for awareness. Thank you.
Another unique story, and isn't it great that grandchildren got to live and love their grandmother? That's the beauty of organ transplantation. Next, we're going to hear from Catherine Motherway, who's an intensive care consultant in Limerick and also the clinical lead for Organ Donor Transplant Ireland, without whom we would not be able to run events like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Carol. Excuse me while I take off my mask. So, as you know, my name is Catherine Motherway and I work in Limerick. I work as an anaesthetist and an intensive care doctor and have the privilege of being the clinical lead locally there since, I think it's 2016 actually, Jim, isn't it, when we started. And today what I hope to achieve is to convey the gratitude of those of us who work in organ donation and transplantation to all of our donors, both living and deceased. The we include staff in intensive care units, transplant teams, theatre staff around the country, transplant physicians, the team in Organ Donation Transplant Ireland who keep us all connected and together, and the specialist teams who care for our recipients and patients awaiting transplantation throughout the country. Our transplant programme would not exist without our donors. Carol and the Minister have outlined in her introduction the figures and the data that we published annually. These figures outline the many donors and their families over the last year whom I and my colleagues have had the privilege to work with and care for as they made a decision to donate. And in preparation for this speech, I thought about the history of organ donation in Ireland in particular, and I've decided to give you a brief outline of organ donation in Ireland since the first transplant in 1963, which was actually still within my lifetime. It's a relatively new specialty. That first transplant was a kidney transplant and it occurred in St. Vincent's Hospital in late 1963. The National Renal Transplant Service is now in Beaumont, as you know, and at the end of 2021, there were over 2,600 recipients with a functioning renal transplant. Our liver transplant programme began in the paediatric centres in the 1980s, which I didn't know until I looked this up, but their figures were too small to sustain a successful service. So from 1991 to 93, staff trained in King's College and our adult service began. And there's now over 1,200 transplants been performed in that service. The first heart transplant was performed in 1985 with Maurice Nelligan, a man I had the pleasure to work with many years ago in Dublin. And that has been followed by over 400 transplants. And our lung transplant programme was provided initially in the United Kingdom, but was relocated to the Mater between 2007 and 2014 with now over 300 transplants performed. Pancreas transplantation was a little bit later. That commenced in the early 90s and frequently is performed in conjunction with kidney transplants. And that is now housed in St. Vincent's, but was initially done in Beaumont. I remember many as a transplant because I worked in Beaumont in the 90s. In all, I did some checking. We have over 3,000 deceased donors who have given the gift of life in the last 58 years, and over 600 living donors. Those donations have resulted in over 7,300 transplants. The lives of transplant recipients, as we have seen today, are saved and enriched by organ donation. Many of our recipients go on to become parents post-transplant, multiplying this enduring gift of life. A colleague was telling me the other day when I was looking for some of these figures that he had a transplant recipient who had just given birth to twins. This is such a wonderful thing for that individual. The need for organs continue to exceed the supply nationally and internationally. COVID has challenged us, and it challenged us in donation and transplantation. They were significantly affected, but we do continue to work to update our knowledge and our guidance regularly. The effect of the pandemic on our intensive care units and hospitals has been well described over the last 2 years. And hospitals, we know that the transplant community has been hit very hard, both in terms of the risk to COVID to those of us who are immunosuppressed, and also its effect on donation and transplantation. The successful rollout of the vaccination programme and boosters where advised will, we hope, continue to protect us as individuals and as a population. It's on occasions like this week that we as a society can promote organ donation, highlighting its benefits to our recipients, but also to the donors and the donor families. For the families who meet me in intensive care, please know that my aim is to save life. But on occasions, if this is not possible, it is our commitment in intensive care to offer organ donation at the end of life as part of our end-of-life care in appropriate circumstances. For bereaved families, I know that the decision to donate can bring comfort in a time of grief and sorrow. When the wishes of the donor are known, it is for families and the staff in intensive care a final act of love and respect in the face of death to honour that wish. So for those of you who are listening online and later on during the week, please have the conversation. Let your family know your wishes. Get a donor card, record it on your licence. I did it the other day myself, it's actually quite easy online. And let your family know, because they will be the people that I will be talking to if you are unfortunate enough to lose your life early. There's an old Irish saying, Scoa Chela Maria Nadina, which means basically under each other, shelter, other people survive. And we live and depend upon each other. And it is really important. Organ donation does save lives. It gives comfort to families at the end of life, despite the great grief and sorrow that they have. And lastly, I'd like to acknowledge my colleague Siobhan, who was my colleague in UHL, who died last year and was an organ donor. She was my colleague in Organ Donation Transplant Ireland. So we all wish her family and thank them very much, and Siobhan, for the gift, because she supported families throughout her working life when they made a decision to donate. So that is my little word. I hope I kept the time. Carol, thank you.
I think you all saw there with Catherine the depth of commitment and professionalism, and she talked about love and respect. And I think we're very, very so lucky to have caliber, people of the caliber, like Siobhan when she was alive, and Siobhan worked with so many donors and died tragically, and still the work continued. And I think we're really, really lucky to have healthcare professionals that we have. So thanks very much, Catherine. Next, we're going to have a video from Siobhan, who will tell her story.
In 2020, I had a simultaneous pancreas kidney transplant in St. Vincent Hospital, and I guess that's why I'm here today. Up until transplant, I was a diabetic, and in 2012, I picked up an E. coli infection during some travel to India for work. E. coli can be lethal, and it had a detrimental impact on me physically and to a somewhat lesser degree mentally. Living with organ failure is hard, but there is hope. I always felt that while one part of my life wasn't exactly easy, it didn't have to have an impact on every part of my life. There's always joy to be found in life. You just have to accept the hardships and try and make peace with them. When I think about my donor and my organ donor family, it's with an outpouring of love and gratitude from the very depths of my soul. And I can only hope that some of that sentiment reaches their own hearts. And I like to think of my dad and my donor hugging it out in heaven, as I would hope to at some stage. Death is a tragic thing. We all have to face it. I have and I will again. But if you can leave the legacy of giving someone a life back who otherwise would have lost theirs, then regardless of anything else, that will have been a life well lived.
So that was Siobhan, who stood in for somebody else who unfortunately took ill at the last minute, and we wish them speedy recovery. So before I hand over for the final words to our chairperson, Colin Mackenzie, just want to make sure that everybody knows that we have refreshments afterwards, and we'd love if you could stay on to chat and hopefully continue the conversation. So I'll hand over to Colin now. Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
I'm so sorry. I think I've mixed up. So I'm being told there's another speaker. I'm so sorry. What can I say? I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
So, hello everyone. It's a hard act to follow all of those wonderful stories of organ receivers. My name is Grier, and I'm here to speak on behalf of my family, who, unfortunately, our mother passed away 10 years ago, and she had an organ donor card. We, as a family, decided to fulfill her wish of becoming an organ donor, and I cannot even begin to describe the comfort and the joy that this has brought me and my family in the past 10 years. And to hear the stories of what happens to the people who receive these organs from people like my mother who pass away, unfortunately, but make the choice to donate their organs, it has been nothing short of a superhero story. To know that one woman could save 5 lives and affect 5 separate families. To know that someone has gotten 10 extra years with their brother, their sister, their son, their daughter, their mother, their father, is nothing short of a miracle. So 10 years ago, my mother unfortunately passed away very unexpectedly from an undetected brain aneurysm. Our father sat us down. I was 11, my sister was 17. We'd never spoken about organ donation. It was never something you really think about when our mother never suffered from an illness that we knew about. We all immediately said yes, because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we agree that our mother wanted this wish fulfilled for her? She had her organ donor card. She knew what she wanted. So we said yes to her choice. In the weeks that followed my mother's passing, we started to receive these letters and these cards that you organ recipients have talked about. These letters that you've written and these cards that you've written anonymously to people like us, people like my family, who in the weeks after, during our grief, we read these letters and these cards. We didn't know any names. We just were so humbled by these people outpouring their stories of their journeys of seeking an organ, and how our choice to just say yes had changed these people's lives and improved their quality of life and given them a second chance at life and given them 10 extra years, which is amazing. One story stuck out more than all of the others and still sticks with us all to this day. It is the story of my mother's heart recipient, who 10 years ago was an 8-year-old girl. An 8-year-old girl who her parents did not know if this was it for her and if they were going to have to say goodbye to their daughter. And just when all hope seemed lost, they received the phone call that would change all of their lives forever.
She's 18 today, and that's insane to think about, that somewhere out there that these parents have gotten 10 extra years with their daughter, who was only a few years younger than me when I lost my mother. Over the years, organ donation has been an immense comfort to me and my family, and I am so honoured to speak today on behalf of my mother. I cannot begin to describe how thankful I am for the letters and the cards that we receive every year. And although this time of grief and this loss is tragic and has impacted upon us and our lives, irreversibly so, I will always look at this as a positive experience that has changed my life for the better. And I am so, so honoured and thankful to be able to speak today. Thank you so much for your time.
Wow. I'm sorry for getting the order wrong. We did a couple of last minute changes, which is how it happened. And I think that's one story that was just so worth hearing, so worth telling. And we are honoured that you've come here today to tell the story, because it's so important we hear your story, and that it has given you solace after a terrible tragedy yourself, and I know your sister Nicole is here as well. And it shows the importance of community, of even at the darkest time, it's possible to do good. And by doing that good, it can help in later life. So you've spoken so eloquently, and I think that's a very good note to hand over for the final speaker. Hope I've got it right this time. And I'm going to ask Colin, Mackenzie, our chairperson, to finish.
Thank you very much, everybody. I won't detain you. Thank you for coming and participating, and especially to our speakers. I said at the beginning, every story is different, and we got a very clear demonstration of that. And because the kidney story, they are all stories, and we hope our friends in the media will convey those stories, because they need to be heard. We have in the, Carol has mentioned it, we have in the Kidney Association two symbols. One is the card and the other is the flower. The card symbolises the request for think about transplantation, think about donating. The forget-me-not symbolises the result, the graft, the two little flowers together. These symbols are very powerful. Think of any local GA football club, sports club. The symbol, what it represents, these round the walls, they're important. And for us, these are two symbols because they symbolise what the Kidney Association is about. We may not always be totally successful, but I can tell you one thing, we always do our best we can, and we are always open to any approach from anybody who thinks they can help, because we have another motto, which is very simply two words, patients first, and that's all we think of. And I thank you very much for your attention, everybody. Thank you.